Welcome back. This is our final module in the team leadership course. It's our summary, and I'm so excited. I can't believe that we're here today. I'm actually really nervous because I want you guys to be excited and end on a high note. And I think this is the 10th time trying to record this, and that doesn't typically happen. Usually, I can talk about this stuff all day long and it just flows. I say a lot of wrong words and talk over myself, but it flows somehow. And I'm just really excited to give you an opportunity to look back and reflect on everything that you've learned these last few weeks. But let's start with boundaries. I just want to say that I hope that the learnings that you experienced last week have helped motivate you to more clearly voice your needs and to model that for the people around you. So that you can give them an opportunity to show you that you can respect and hear their needs as well. When that happens, everyone feels safe and the environment thrives. But we'll review that anyway today because that's what we're going to do. So, our learning objectives, which by now you are very, very familiar with. We want to remember what team leadership is. How did we define it these last few weeks and kind of look back and see it from a little bit of a different lens and talk overall, kind of zoom out and say, if we use all of these elements of team leadership, what does it really look like in practice when it's in balance, when it's out of balance, and why does that matter? Hopefully by now we know that it matters. And then how do we continue to integrate it? So, leadership, our classic kind of crappy definition, telling other people what to do and getting them to do it. Now, we can all agree that in general, you hire somebody to do a job and you do hope that they do it, right? Or you do expect them to do it. But there's so much more to leadership than that, especially if you want to grow, if you want to scale, if you want to thrive, then that means everybody, doing more than what you expect them to do and wanting to do more than what you expect them to do and having new ideas that are better than yours, which is really cool. So, our definition of team leadership is facilitating positive, interdependent relationships with mutual respect, consideration, and support. Now, when I first introduced this, perhaps you were like, what? That's a lot of words. But hopefully, now as you look back and you say, oh, yeah, I can see how those five elements. Really specifically helped develop these interdependent relationships, how it can help with mutual respect. I mean, both consent and boundaries are really about respect and consideration, and how we can support each other through empathy, gratitude, and taking time to make sure that we have clarity. So I love this analogy, which I also think is extra funny because I don't play tennis. I know there's something about love, love. I know there's serves. I know there's doubles and singles. It's some weird counting system. But for our purposes, the important thing is that you volley back and forth, right? You send the ball one way and they send it back. And that's what a relationship looks like. And so once you master once you master control of your half of a professional relationship or professional partnership through our self leadership, then you've been able to now mindfully think about, okay, how can I hit the ball in a way that helps them also self lead, that helps bring out the best in them, assuming that they're not your opponent, right? That you're on the same team or maybe you're their teacher. I don't know. But that's what team leadership is all about. It's the ability to model and inspire that self leadership piece so that all team members can feel excited and they can bring their A game, their best serve to the game. That's what's really cool about team leadership is the positive influence it can have. And so when I first introduced this, I use these examples that are pretty harsh. I'm not going to lie, right? Just do it. You did it wrong. You're underperforming. Hopefully, most of us don't work for leaders or we aren't the type of leaders who say things like this. But I got to tell you that some of the people that I coach are amazing leaders. And in times of stress, they still feel really frustrated and they focus on the negative, and they focus on the underperformance and they're like, well, just figure it out. Like, this is what I'm paying you for. And that frustration really comes out and it can be so frustrating for everybody involved. It just breeds more frustration. And so team leadership is about, well, A, relying on everything you learned in self leadership so you can pause and soothe your own frustration and then communicate in a different way, even in times of stress. And in order to do this, right, we talked a lot about social safety, a lot about feeling safe, a lot about feeling psychologically safe. And that comes from, among other studies, to Google Project Aristotle that found the number one predictor to team success was psychological safety. And there are tons of other studies out there that support this. So if you have any questions about it, or if you want to dig in and learn more, which would be super cool, then definitely do some research on it. You will be surprised or really excited to see how much is out there. And then let's move on to the five elements of self leadership. Let's zoom out and see them all together and do a quick review now that you've been practicing them a little bit more. And the way that I describe it might be a little bit different than the first time I described it because so it can give you a little bit of a different perspective. So again, we had empathy, gratitude, consent, clarity, boundaries, and they were deliberately in this order because one led into the next. Now, empathy in balance and out of balance, right? Out of balance, a leader is kind of out of touch. They don't seem to see, to really tune in to their employees. A leader may be very critical and hyper focused on the negative, or narcissistic, so they see employees as like a reflection of themselves. Well, it reflects poorly on me, that sort of thing. And that breeds a culture of fear because everybody always, they don't feel seen, people don't feel heard, they don't feel tuned into, they don't feel like they're humans, they feel like they're robots. As opposed to when empathy is in balance, a leader is really tuned in, hears the words that aren't being said, and is encouraging instead of critical, focuses on the positives and helps people do more of those, and takes on an attitude of servitude, isn't afraid to get dirty, to do the grunt work, to demonstrate that, even the invisible jobs are really important and they need to be seen. And all of that helps with collaboration because the leader sees and feels actually what it's like to be doing that job. And when they tune in, they're more open to hearing other ideas. So I hope you've been practicing empathy and that over the past few weeks, you're now seeing yourself as more tuned in, more encouraging. Even if you were pretty great at empathy before, we can always improve, right? And the great thing about empathy is that it increases engagement. It helps everybody want to be there. They feel seen, they feel heard. It turns a team into a tribe. And you may remember from our self leadership series that whole idea of social evaluative threat. You can turn that on its head and say, okay, when people feel seen and heard and feel safe, they want more of it, right? So they become even more engaged and show up more. It's a really cool, powerful tool, as is gratitude. So I hope you've been practicing gratitude. It's definitely something that you can put into practice. It is an act, it is a behavior. And when gratitude is out of balance, people feel ill. There's a lot of fear of failure because there's again so much focus on the negative, which creates an environment where everyone just feels really dejected because they feel like they're never good enough. They're just never doing anything right. Or when they do something well, not nearly as much emphasis is placed on what was done well versus what was done wrong. And then everybody's just too serious and work is no fun. And you have a high absenteeism. People are slow. They often call in sick a lot. They start to withdraw even more. And you often have a high turnover if gratitude is out of balance. So this is a really big one. And when it's in balance, people are engaged, they're confidently creative, they feel empowered because they know what they're doing well and they want to do more of it and they want more gratitude for it, right? And they are focused on just getting progressively better because all of those little incremental improvements are noticed and appreciated. And that creates a light environment, a happy environment. And when you have a light and happy environment, people start having more fun. When they start having more fun, there's more humor involved, which adds to more fun. So gratitude can totally, very quickly change a culture and turn it around to make it more lighthearted and fun. It is the antidote to complacency. So if there's anybody who's just, working their 9 to 5, doing the grind to go home and collect their paycheck and wonders why they don't get a bonus or why they're not getting paid more money. Gratitude can really help people say, I want to bring more to this. I want to try a little harder. Like I know that they appreciate me and I want to show them more of what I can do. So it's a very powerful tool if you struggle with complacency. And I hope that you have been using it and practicing it. And now we're like, yeah, Sarah, I got this. Like we're on the same page here, sister. And then consent, which again is not just about sex or sexual harassment, although it can help prevent that. Consent is more about openness. It's about buy-in. It's about knowing if something is okay with somebody, right? And when consent is out of balance, you have a lot of unsolicited advice, a lot of lecturing, long lectures that someone is not open to and can't even hear in the first place, which leads to a lot of conflict because nobody is checking in to see, like, do you want to hear my opinion? Do you want to hear me gossip about Jerry today. Maybe not, right? And it can lead to conflict. It can lead to a lot of problems. It can also lead to unsolicited fixing, just being like, oh, well, I'll just fix that for you, or I'm just going to change this for you, as opposed to having open and honest conversations about it or asking if it's even a problem in the first place. And all of that can lead to a pressure cooker environment because there's a lot of assumptions that are made. And commonly, when consent is out of balance, assumptions are made that people are going to show up, or like they're going to work harder, or they're going to work more hours because, well, we're on a time crunch. Isn't this important to you? I'd assumed that it was important to you. Consent out of balance can also easily turn into manipulation because you just do what you want to do and ask for forgiveness later, or you phrase questions in a way that makes people feel like they have to say yes. Consent, when used in balance, and now I kind of wish I would have said this in the consent module because it's brilliant. Thank you very much. But consent used well lets people know that they can say no. Like, it is honestly genuinely okay if you decline me right now. That's how you know if you're asking consent, if you're really in balance with consent. And when you do that, consent used in balance facilitates more conversation because there's more give and take. Oh, so you say no, okay, cool, I respect that. Can you help me find an alternative solution? Right? Or do you have any other ideas? And that might lead to some compromise. They might say, okay, well, here are my other ideas. Or, well, I know that I can't work tonight, but if you really do need me, I can work next weekend and I'm happy to do so. So that kind of the consent conversations lead to compromise. And it also helps with facilitation. So, as opposed to having to drive the train and control every piece of the train, when you ask for people's buy-in and they take ownership of that project, you can trust them to go and build the rest of the road for you. You paved the way, you cleared the trees, you got their buy-in, you got their consent, and now they're going to go build it. And you don't have to micromanage every step of the way. And that helps your team thrive. It makes them feel respected. It makes them feel heard. It makes them feel like they have autonomy. And it's really exciting when you ask them if they're okay with something or if they're interested in something, and then they say yes. They take ownership and responsibility for it, and that drives them. So, consent is another very powerful tool, and it creates an environment of respect where everyone's respecting each other's needs, boundaries, preferences, and it says, I'm not just going to assume that you're cool with this or that you want to do this project. How do you feel about it? And then we have clarity. This is the element of team leadership that most of my executives that I coach complain about. They're like, I've said it 15 different times in 15 different ways. I don't know why they still don't get it. Well, it's because you keep talking and you're not asking any questions. So when clarity is out of balance, there are too many directives, more assumptions, but these assumptions are not about whether or not something is okay. These assumptions are about understanding. Well, I just assumed you understood. And typically, then because of this, there becomes an even narrower focus because the executive or the leader says, oh, okay, well, I wasn't clear enough, so now I'm going to get really clear and really specific. And that compounds the problem because then any deviation from that very narrow specific directive is wrong, right? And so there tons and tons of misunderstandings. Even when there are five people at the same meeting, they walk away with a different understanding of what's going on, and nobody's moving forward. But when clarity is imbalanced, there are lots of open-ended questions. What was your takeaway? What was your perspective? I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. And real, genuine listening, not just putting on a show, which I think happens sometimes, right? Like, well, I'm listening because I want them to feel heard, but I really have no interest in actually implementing their suggestions. Really implementing and kind of asking yourself, wow, is their idea better than mine? If so, then great. I hired an awesome person. And clarity is also in balance when there's a lot of big picture thinking. So the leader and everyone is clear on the vision. And when everyone's clear on the vision, it's easy to hear a directive or to hear a project and weave it into the framework of the big picture or the vision or the big why. And then when everybody's doing that, everybody has think sync. So they're all just automatically working toward that objective. But that objective has to be really, really, really clear. And you have to ask people if they are clear on that objective and what their perspective is. So the takeaway here is that clarity comes from the question, not from the talking, not from the clear communication. It really comes from the question, from the question of what was your perception on that, and that gives you an opportunity to then say, oh, interesting. Let's talk about that some more. And then boundaries, which is the most fresh in your mind. When boundaries are out of balance, when a leader is moody, when that invisible fence like moves underneath the ground, and so where it was yesterday, it isn't there today, and then oops, shock. Then that work environment is very unpredictable, and that can make people really passive aggressive. Or if even your employees tend to do that, they tend to be moody, and they aren't clear and open about their boundaries, and or they maybe even don't know the boundaries themselves or the values themselves because they don't have a high level of self leadership, then and self awareness. Then what can happen is the boundaries are crossed, and so they feel angry, but they can't really communicate it because they didn't communicate that the boundary was there in the first place, and they get passive aggressive and have a bad attitude. Or more obviously, when boundaries are out of balance, you often will have a problem with people respecting the word no. And it's not that they outright disrespect the word no, although that would definitely be going past the boundary. It's that they kind of push at it. Okay, well, is that a no? Not right now. Is that a no? And not for the purpose of gaining clarity, like that's okay if it's done with that intention, but for the purpose of trying to still get what you want at the end. And this also feeds a lot of codependency, because the people pleasers on teams will want to please the leader by always doing more, 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 in order to feel like they're on the leader's good side, because these unpredictable leaders tend to show favoritism, and that just creates a lot of codependent issues where everyone's too reliant on each other and not interdependent, like we have when boundaries are in balance. But let's start at the top. So when boundaries are in balance, it's more of a predictable environment. Decisions are made objectively instead of based on moods or favoritism, and people can easily convey their needs. It's that type of a culture where people can just say, here's what I need, here's what I value, and know that everyone else on that team is going to do their best to genuinely respect it. And they will also respect the word no and won't try to push them or still try to get them to do it in the end. Just no means no means no. And that allows everyone to be interdependent. So each person is autonomous, but still knows, how their job supports the overall team objective. And the summary here is that boundaries encourage candor and a sense of social safety. So we all feel safe enough to have real talk, to really advocate for ourselves. So again, the self-talk, and we haven't looked at this for a few weeks, but the self-talk for team leadership may sound like, I lead others through example, coaching, and a high level of respect in order to facilitate team-wide autonomy and emotional well-being. Now that you're more familiar with in depth kind of what this means. I hope that, this resonates with you even more than it did the first time that you read it. And then let's go ahead and talk about, which leader would you rather work for? Which for some reason I'm not seeing my banner up here, but this is supposed to say, which leader would you rather work for? Or something along those lines, like it has for every other module that we've done. Grand finale. But would you rather work for a leader without a team approach or a leader with a team approach, right? Like someone who's out of touch or tuned in, who creates a pressure cooker or helps teams thrive? Would you rather work for someone who makes assumptions about everything or who asks and then honestly listens? Someone who takes their staff for granted or who demonstrates a high level of appreciation for even the smallest tasks. Someone who disrespects no or respects no, who creates conflict or facilitates compromise. When these five elements of team leadership are in balance or they're out of balance, that can make the difference in these two leaders. So let's do our very last review in this course. So, again, the five elements of team leadership, which you're very familiar with: empathy, gratitude, consent, clarity, boundaries. And that old definition of leadership was just telling other people what to do and getting them to do it. Our definition is facilitating positive interdependent relationships with mutual respect, consideration, and support. And I hope that as you read this, you're now thinking, yeah, that's what we've really got now, or that's what we're really working toward now. And I know how to do it, and I'm empowered with the tools to do it. And the self talk, may not sound exactly like this, but it can say, I'm a self leader and I encourage other people to be self leaders through example. I ask and I listen, AKA coach. And through consent and setting boundaries, I show them a high level of respect. And I do it for the purpose of helping everybody be autonomous and feel safe and have their own sense of emotional well being here. That's cool. That's a really good leader. Okay, so we've defined team leadership like a million times, right? We've talked about it, what it looks like in balance and out of balance when you're practicing it and when you're not. And hopefully by now we know how it, we know that it matters. And how to integrate it, the best next step is to go and check out our other modules. There's going to be a lot of how to's, and now you're perfectly prepared and set up to learn how to lead up, how to lead Gen Z, how to lead remotely, how to lead for productivity. The Leadership Institute is your oyster, and you can go pick whatever you want next to focus on, and it will continue to help you integrate all of these learnings, in more specific ways. So first, we're going to reassess. So next, we're going to see how much you've grown. You took a team leadership assessment in the very first module. We've been working toward it. And ideally, we want to see improvement. So the next lesson, you can take it again, and you can look at the very first module where you wrote down the score that you got and compare, and hopefully you will see some growth there. And congratulations, you graduated. Whew, congratulations to both of us, because this was really a lot of hard work, and I hope that you felt my passion for it and my desire to really teach you these tools, help you think about things in new ways. And listen, there's more where this came from. There are many, many other modules to go play around with. If you want a personalized certificate, please reach out to admin@hodgescoaching.com, and we are more than happy to email you your own certificate of completion. So you can post it on LinkedIn or hang it on your wall or file it away or burn it, whatever you want. Hopefully not that. And don't forget to go visit our LinkedIn group. Now that you have graduated from these first two courses, you are well poised to also be a leader in our Leadership Institute to help other people, navigate these elements of leadership and to, think of new ideas for action steps or to share insights and think about things in different ways. And you can be there with someone who is struggling and help all of us on the Hodges Coaching team answer those questions. So I hope you'll keep hanging out there and we'll keep taking more modules and keep learning. So yeah, a couple of the recommended modules leading up is very popular if you want to figure out how to maybe manage a leader that you have that you maybe struggle to get along with, or perhaps you want them to have more openness, or leading for productivity. If you're struggling with being as productive as you'd like to be, if your days are kind of messy or too strict, or you're still struggling with that self governance piece, perhaps leading for productivity is great for you. And leading Gen Z is one of my favorite topics. I talk about it on podcasts a lot so look for those. But you can also take a course where I just lay out some how tos of how to really reach Gen Z and young millennials, and how to get the most out of them by speaking to their values. And don't forget, leading requires feeling. Hopefully, that needs no explanation by now. All of us are human beings. You are a human being. I am a human being. Thank you for your compassion and your empathy toward me as well, as I do my best here for you. I know and you know that all of these presentations have not been perfect. Sometimes I talk too fast, sometimes I talk over myself. And so, thank you for giving me the grace to stick with me through this until the end. And I just want to remind you that, surround yourself with people in your life who give you grace to continue to grow and support you on this path as you become an amazing leader and create an incredible culture for your organization. Thanks so much. And I will see you in one of our other modules.